My heart goes out to the film industry for the devastating pain that this tragedy caused and the old wounds that have been reopened. I am saddened by the way the media sensationalized our traumatic tragedy and portrayed me as a complete monster, which has actually been the total opposite of what's been in my heart. Your Honor, when I took on Rust, I was young and I was naive, but I took my job as seriously as I knew how to. Despite not having proper time, resources, and staffing, when things got tough, I just did my best to handle it.
Hannah Gutierrez, before she was sentenced to 18 months in prison, but there is still a question about how the live round ended up on the movie set. Two different theories we're looking at. Right now we're going to focus on the theory that Hannah Gutierrez is the one responsible for bringing that round onto the set. If you take a look at some of the evidence from her trial, here is a dummy box that was found, and there's one live round with the, I guess, the silver primer. We can see it right there. If you look at some selfies that Hannah Gutierrez took while on the set, if you look a little bit more closely at it, you will see that she's taking pictures, and you can see live rounds actually in the photograph itself. So there were live rounds around her. And then we get to the box. This is the box where the live round came from and was found. There was one found in here as well. 45 long Colt dummies, and you see the little JS. Well, the second thing that you're looking at right now was a text from Thel Reed to Hannah Gutierrez showing what the box looked like at their home. So you can see the similarities with the little JS. So prosecutors put those pieces together and said, hey, this is where it came from. It came from Thel Reed. It came from Hannah Gutierrez. Here's Seth Kenny testifying about where this live round could have come from and whether it could have come from him. Take a listen.
Have you ever had a box of dummies from Mr. Swanson with that label?
No, never.
And why would you not have a box with this label if you're sourcing your dummy rounds from Mr. Swanson?
Well, 1883 was the first period show that I needed 45 long Colt dummy rounds for. Prior to that, even though we had done a flashback scene with Tim McGraw in Yellowstone, there was no call for dummy rounds, or the Propmaster sourced them elsewhere. So I just never needed them. And when I did, I needed them by the thousands, not by boxes of 50. And so what happened is Joe Swanson, he asked me, do you want me to package them up? I said, no, there's no point. Right? It's more work for everybody. So he sent them to me in bulk.
Okay, and so you never had anything like this in your possession?
Never.
Okay, so you can see, well, obviously, he has a reason to not be 100% truthful, right? He may very well be telling the truth. I don't know. But he has a reason not to, because the other way those live rounds could have gotten there was through him. So let's try to get to the bottom of this. Let's bring in our experts. Propmaster, armor, author of the book, Prop Gun Safety for Film and TV, Dutch Merrick is back with us. And also joining me here in studio, former Propmaster with over a decade of experience, worked with Alec Baldwin on the film 13 Days to Glory, and also an attorney, Jeffery Spellerberg, is with us. Thank you to you both for being here. Jeffrey, I'll start with you. You know, you look at the way this was pieced together by prosecutors in the first case. These are the dummy boxes. These were at Thel Reed's house. Hannah Gutierrez is his daughter. 2 + 2 = 4 is what they're saying.
I have a problem with anything Seth Kenny says. He's the one that's always testifying, the expert explaining where all these dummy rounds came from. And the fact of the matter is that he was the most likely person in any event to do this. And he injected himself very early into this case as a junior sleuth. And he shows himself up in maybe hundreds of hours or whatever, dealing with the detectives, dealing with the prosecutor. And the prosecutor's entire case is based upon 6 rounds with silver primers on them. And these apparently came from a bucket of 500 loose rounds. And as if the only possible possible rounds were these 6 rounds, but we are all forgetting Sarah Zachary. What did she do? As soon as it happened, she talked to somebody, apparently it was Seth Kenny, and what happened? How many rounds disappeared? You know, you've got to ask yourself that question, Vinny. And were those all silver, or was she told to throw away some other type? Was she only told to throw away maybe the ones that didn't rattle? She scoured the set and made things disappear, and then the prosecutor based his entire case on, I'm able now to look at the real rounds that were found on set, but the only ones they were able to find, because 30 days, Sarah never told anybody until 30 days was after and she got her plea deal, right? That's what she did. So, my opinion, you have a real problem with the prosecutor basing her entire case on, she can look at photographs, and then she's going to deny the evidence to the defense based on photographs, and the guy's trying to tell her, look, help my client out. There were more rounds other than the 4 you found on set, and they look different. That's what they're trying to tell her, and she decides on her own call. She puts herself in the game, says, I'm going to be the one who suppresses evidence, and I'm going to hide it. You know, if you want to have fairness for the Hutchins family, if you want to have fairness, you got to play fair.
You got to play fair to get to the truth, and that's your obligation. Dutch, you know, looking at this box, these 45 long Colt JS dummies, does that look familiar to you at all? Have you ever dealt with the JS dummies? And does this make any sense that the armorer would go and get some dummy rounds from her dad and somehow mix them up with a live round?
I use reputable vendors for when I'm doing props on shows and armory. So we get them from the prop rental houses where Joe Swanson is a provider, and they're repackaged or reboxed for their brand. So, if it's cinema weaponry, it'll say cinema weaponry right on the box, but they may very well be Joe Swanson blanks. So I certainly have used them in the past. I acquire my dummy rounds generally also from the prop houses, and I imagine they have Joe Swanson manufacture those. When I rent a gun, they will include a few dummy rounds either way so that we have them to dress in or cycle with the gun. And the thought of Hannah Gutierrez-Reed mixing live rounds with dummies, as young and naive and overwhelmed and potentially inept as she may have been on that show, it's hard for me to imagine her growing up with her dad, as she did, having that level of just a gun awareness that she could have possibly mixed live rounds and real and dummy rounds into the same box. It's hard for me to fathom. As bad as she screwed up with other things, I have a challenge seeing that could be a possibility. And I agree with Jeff, honestly, that right now it looks like all roads seem to point to Seth Kenny, who really did steer the investigation. From the very beginning, he was offering them guidance in the form of well, when we look at this and we look at that, and let's go look over there. And it came out in trial today that again and again and again, he said that in the past, he has basically laid the blame on her, like she did it, she's trying to hide it, those types of framings.
Yeah, and the bottom line, when you talk about dummies versus live rounds, they look similar. What's the difference between the silver primer and the brass primer? Is that a normal difference? What does that mean?
Well, manufacturers will manufacture primer. Now, remember, a cartridge is based in 4 components. The primer, which ignites the powder, which pushes the bullet, and it's all held together in the shell. Now, the different primer manufacturers make them either in a brass color or a silver nickel color. It came out in this trial, Seth Kenny said that Winchester stopped making nickel colored primers 10 years ago. So he used that as a dating mechanism to say, oh yeah, those must have been created so long ago because they stopped making them. And then later, he said also that Joe Swanson admitted that he tends to mix them up and use whichever primers are on hand. So in the same batch, you may see some silver ones.
You could get silver, that's interesting. All right, everyone stay where they are. When we come back, we'll take a look at the other theory, which is that they may have came from Seth Kenny. Don't go anywhere.
Did you grow suspicious of Mr. Kenny as he kept saying that?
No.
Oh, okay. So, in any event, you knew that Mr. Teskey was at least somewhat involved because when you're interviewing Mr. Kenny, he's calling him in front of you, correct?
Yes.
Sending you screenshots of messages with him, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Teskey showed up here, according to you, at the Hannah Gutierrez retrial, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Teskey then walked into the police precinct with ammunition that he claims and says is matching to the ammunition that struck Ms. Hutchins, right?
I don't think he ever made the statement it was matching.
Well, that's really for law enforcement and the FBI to decide, isn't it?
Which would have been investigated if he would have answered a phone call or returned a phone call.
Unbelievable moment, but this is important. So Seth Kenny clearly is under suspicion as being the source of this live round, clearly by Alec Baldwin's attorney and also by Hannah Gutierrez's attorney. But here he is when he's asked directly about that during Hannah Gutierrez's trial.
Did you provide any live ammunition to the set of Rust?
No.
Did you ever give any live ammunition to Sarah Zachary?
No.
So where would he get live ammunition from if he's a prop guy, right? Well, they were training the actors for 1883. They were training them. They were shooting real guns with live rounds. So take a listen to some of the testimony about all of that, because this is one of the theories as to how a live round ends up on the set of the movie Rust and in Alec Baldwin's gun in his hand and eventually in the body and through the body of Helena Hutchins.
At some point in time, did you and Mr. Reed work on a film together where Mr. Reed was an armorer or a coach and you were the vendor, the supplier?
That was, it was 1883. It wasn't a feature film. It was more of a, one-run episodic.
Was there coaching sessions that included real firearms?
There were. Then at some point, it was decided, and I'm not sure who made the decision, that they actually wanted to set up a private range on a portion of Taylor Sheridan's private ranch with an appropriate backstop and it controls. And that is where the cast, it was a bit of a team building as well, learned about how the functioning of the firearms, and we were mixed between blanks and live.
Do you know where the live ammunition came from that was used in those coaching sessions?
I do.
Where did it come from?
The .45 Long Colt came from Thale. He had a number of reloads that I asked him to bring because at that time it was very difficult to source live ammunition. It was difficult. So he had what turned out to be 325 reloads of .45 Long Colt.
Was all of the .45 Long Colt live ammunition that was used for the training camp on 1883, was it all used up?
No.
So can you tell us approximately how much was left over?
It was, if memory serves me correct, it was about 125 rounds, roughly.
And what happened to that ammunition after you finished training the actors on 1883?
Well, that's a little bit hazy. At one point, I do recall that certain things were offloaded from my Sprinter van because they just weren't needed, and that was one of those things. But at some point, it got moved back to Albuquerque, and I've never been able to pinpoint the date.
Let's talk about the dummy rounds that you provided to the set of Rust. Did you provide .45 Long Colt dummy rounds to the set of Rust?
I did. I supplied a single box of 50 on October 12th.
And where did those dummy rounds come from?
They had just come off of the day prior from the prop truck in Texas. from 1883.
You did retain some of the reloaded live rounds after 1883 completed.
After the 1883 cowboy training camp, yes.
And those then made their way back to Albuquerque, you've said, to PDQ props, correct?
Yes.
And you don't know whether those returned, I think you've stated before October 21st. You said you were hazy on the date, right?
Yes.
But we do know that you came back to Albuquerque from 1883 on or about October 11th because you met with Sarah Zachary October 12th, correct?
Correct.
So when you came back, you brought dummy rounds from the set of 1883 to give to Sarah, correct?
Correct.
And those were 45 long Colt dummy rounds.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you had a whole group of dummies on 1883. How many do you think there were?
5,000.
Okay. So out of those 5,000, you brought some back from Miss Zachary. And at some point, you can't tell the jury when, those live rounds came back to your place.
I've never been able to identify the exact date.
Well, you also said on direct, they were delivered back, let me get you the words you used. They were offloaded from your Sprinter van and got moved back to Albuquerque in the bathroom. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, when you said got moved, isn't that you who moved them back?
Yes.
Okay. So in reality, you drove them back from 1883, and you can't remember that date at all.
No.
All right, let me bring back in my guests. I've got Jeffery Spellerberg with me here in studio, and Dutch Merrick is with us as well. Jeffrey, your thoughts? You're not buying?
I don't buy a word he says. I mean, his story about 5,000 rounds of dummy rounds or whatever he's talking about, it's crazy. That I've never been on a movie set that had huge boxes of dummy rounds. And he also can't forget, he forgets every material date that really sort of puts him in the ringer. And then he turns around and he can remember all sorts of things about all sorts of people anytime that it doesn't involve him, or if he's pointing the finger at somebody else. And I was actually, Dutch has a good point about this too, and I don't, maybe we can get.
Yeah, go ahead, Dutch.
Oh, well, I think it's amazing that there's only 2 days that he traveled between Texas and Albuquerque, so it's a 50-50 shot at which day he came, but he's racked his brain and there's no way he can figure out on his calendar when he made that trip. I'm sorry, that just sounds really absurd, and I wouldn't accept that as an answer if I was a defense attorney.
How about moving the stuff into the bathroom? Do prop houses have bathrooms?
Well, first of all, prop houses, legitimate prop houses, do not have live ammunition. They are a sanitary, sterile environment, just like a film studio. You're dealing with firearms for actors, and you're dealing with a lot of guns that have been modified that if you put a regular round into them, they're going to blow up. So the last thing you're going to allow into a prop house is live ammunition. So the thought that he put it in his bathroom, like that somehow makes it safe, is really absurd to me.
Now, there was another part of that first trial, and this is, again, it was very shocking when we heard it the first time. Sarah Zachary, who's working for Seth Kenny on the Rust set, what she did after the shooting of Helena Hutchins. Take a listen.
Wouldn't you think that the police would want to see everything on set?
Yes.
Okay. So when you throw away rounds that they may have wanted to see, don't you understand that to be an issue?
No, because again, it wasn't the rounds in question.
But that isn't your determination, right, to determine what's in question. That is the law enforcement's determination, correct?
Okay.
Okay, Dutch, I'll begin with you. Is there a time and a place to throw away dummies?
This just boggles my mind. First of all, dummy rounds are an asset, and we all know it. So you've either rented them or purchased them for the production. And if you purchase them, you need to turn them into the production at the end of the job. And if you rented them, they have to go back to the prop house, or else you're going to have to buy them. The other thing that really weirds me out about what she says is she had to drive on her day off an hour each way to go get this precious box of dummies from Seth Kenny. Remember, he said there was none available because he had 5,000 of them on another show. But he says that he hand polished each one of 50, and he shined them up real nice, and he rattled them twice, and he checked each one. And Sarah Zachary has to drive out there on her day off and get this box of unobtainium, and then there she is on a film set thrown away after a take. Which is it? They're impossible to find, or they're like popcorn and you just throw them over your shoulder when you're done? It doesn't make any sense.
Does it make any sense to you, Jeffrey?
Not at all. His story about carefully polishing, I think they went on about 5 minutes about him carefully polishing every single round to make sure they were perfectly matching the stuff that I guess how he knew if they were on the set they had to be polished, I don't know. But I've never heard of that in my life. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, that a guy would, if he spent a minute on each one, he spent an entire hour polishing dummy rounds to send down to Sarah Zachary. It's absurd.
And the other thing is the throwing away of these. To me, that makes zero sense. I don't think Sarah Zachary on her own is going to do that.
I don't think she's throwing away dummies. I think she's throwing away other live ammunition that was on that set. I think she was, I don't know if, I'm not going to couch it, but I don't know if Seth Kenny told her to do it, but apparently she was in communication right out of it happened, finding out what happened, and if there was other ammunition on that set, it's gone, and all they ever found were the ones with the silver primers, and then the court built their entire case on it. He was their expert. Soon they were in bed with him, and once they're in bed with him, they can't change, the state can't change its story. Now they're stuck with whatever, they're saying everything that Seth Kenny sort of tells them to say, I think. I don't know where they're getting all these ideas.
So you don't think the prosecution followed the right path here in trying to determine where the live round came from?
I got to tell you, Seth Kenny's a suspect. How did he ever get to be this guy who's giving you advice and being your expert, or a pseudo-expert on this case? Well, how is he spending all this time with your CSI and telling her, you know, he's teaching her how to identify weapons? It's either CSI or it's another person. But he spends all this time, and she suddenly becomes an expert in New Mexico on how prop ammunition is supposed to look. He had every opportunity to steer it away from him, and I don't know if he did or not, but I wouldn't bet my life on any of that. So
I wouldn't either. All right, everyone is staying with us. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the gun that was in the hand of Alec Baldwin, the gun that killed Elena Hutchins.
One of the most successful true crime TV shows ever.
This is crazy.
Now has a new home on America's original true crime obsession, 48 Hours on Court TV. Coming up next on Court TV.
Who is Billy Ray Turner? How does he have any connection to Lorenzen Wright?
He was manipulated. See plans, he plotted. See the reason why he's gone.
Accomplice to Murder with Vinnie Politan. Sunday night, 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
For certain.
So based on the experiment that we did with this gun back in August of 2023, even if the hammer of the gun was damaged on October 21st of 2021, would the trigger have to be pulled for the gun to fire?
Two things. Yes, the trigger would have to be depressed or pulled. The hammer would have to be at the full cock position, and it can't be damaged because it would do what we saw here, and what you just saw here would not fire the gun.
So hypothetically, though, even if it were damaged on October 21st, the operator, that being Mr. Baldwin, would have had to have pulled the trigger.
Yes, if you could get the hammer to stay at the full cock position, that's the difficulty to overcome.
Which it doesn't want to do.
It will not do.
From the beginning, we've heard Alec Baldwin say to George Stephanopoulos and to others, I didn't pull the trigger. The gun went off. Do guns just go off? Well, this is the gun in question. Take a look. This is Alec Baldwin's Pieta long Colt .45 revolver. I'm not a gun expert, but we do have them on Court TV. We have one tonight. Here's Dutch Merrick breaking down this revolver so we better understand how it functions. Let's bring him back in. Dutch Merrick is with us. Dutch, give us a little more detail about what we just saw and what we just experienced and the significance in it in trying to figure out how the gun went off.
Well, I've heard since Alec Baldwin came out in the press ages ago now saying he didn't pull the trigger, and my specialty has been with semi-automatic pistols and firearms. However, I know a bunch of the cowboy shooters that do competitions with these old Western-style guns, and I've talked to them at length, and they've explained to me that it's possible that this hammer can fly home without the trigger catching on one of the stops. And so they showed me this as an experiment, and I've been able to recreate it time and time again. What happens is the hammer has to come all the way back, and as it does, the trigger sets like a mousetrap into a little notch. But in order to do that, the trigger has to come forward a little bit. So if you just prevent the trigger from going forward that maybe 2 millimeters, it won't engage into the slot. And not only will it not engage in it, it leaves the hammer clear to go all the way down. It doesn't stop in the halfway point, doesn't stop in the safety. It just goes all the way home to a round. So if you pull it back and you've even bound the trigger a little bit, or you've got a little piece of material jammed up in there, some leather from the holster could be stuck up in the trigger, the hammer will go all the way forward and drop on a round. Of course, the odds that it would drop on a round in this instance were still only 1 in 6 because there was only 1 live round in this gun. It was crazy.
And just to kind of put this into perspective with what happened with Alec Baldwin, we saw in the video that was taken before the shooting in the morning, his finger seems to be in where the trigger is. So does that do what that little piece of blue material was doing in the video that you made, that if your finger is in there, even if you're not purposely pulling it back, your finger can prevent it from making that movement forward if your finger's in that slot?
Yeah, in theory, yes. And what I did was I just cut a little piece of blue plastic about 1 inch square and dropped it into that space. So it doesn't put any pressure on the trigger at all. It just prevents it from going forward. So what happens with these Western style revolvers, they have very small grips. So when you hold on to them, you can often only get 2 fingers around the grip. And it's common for shooters to put their first finger in the trigger guard as sort of a brace and kind of put your finger in and push away. If you do put your finger into the trigger guard and push away with your fingernail against that trigger guard, there's a potential that the fat of your finger, the little muscle on your middle digit, can actually press the trigger sideways, or at least impede it from swinging forward. And that's all you got to do to keep this hammer from locking into place, is impede its movement. Or if you just bound it unconsciously, not thinking you're pulling the trigger, you're just pressing the trigger sideways a little bit, it won't go into the notch, and it'll fall home every time.
So that makes some sense here, Jeffrey. So I guess it is technically possible that he's not pulling the trigger, but he's preventing the trigger from doing what it wants to do when you're pulling back the hammer.
Yeah, the crazy part is Alec Baldwin may be telling the absolute truth about what he experienced that day. And when Dutch explained that to me, when I saw that, I believe that as well, because sometimes these guns have hair triggers. We heard today that this was supposedly a new gun, but apparently been used in a gun show for years, and apparently where people have been dry firing without the hammer pin in there. And so then they gave that gun to Seth Kenny, and that's the gun that ended up doing this. And there was also another misfire on the set with the same gun or a gun exactly like it during this movie, and it's very rare to have any misfires on a movie, and I think there were 3 on this movie. So there's something goofy about the guns maybe, or maybe there's just people that are untrained and really don't know how to handle weapons.
Absolutely. And we get back to Dutch. When the gun goes off, it's during a rehearsal. But I guess part of what they're rehearsing is what the gun is going to look like when it's coming up. Alec Baldwin likely focusing on the movements of his hand, but not knowing that. I mean, to me, that's something that they should be trained in, right? Is that, listen, you don't even have to pull the trigger. If your finger is within that finger guard, it can be enough to set the gun off even without squeezing the trigger by pulling the hammer back.
Well, when we create a scene, we choreograph every move with the gun, and we go through with the actor. We know where they're going to point it, when they're going to put their finger on the trigger, etc. And then we make the gun safe for the scene. And in this instance, it was a rehearsal. He was assured by 2 professionals that the gun didn't have any blanks in it, and that's the worst you can imagine. Is there any blanks or no blanks? That's it. It's a positive or negative. So it only had dummies in it, so they can be seen from the camera, as though it looked as though the front of the revolver looked like it's loaded. So the worst thing he can ever imagine happening is that if he did drop the hammer and there was a big mistake made and there was a blank in there, would be a loud bang and a puff of smoke. Worst case, someone's really close to it, they get burned. But he's in a headspace thinking that everything he does with that gun is entirely safe. So if these people are standing in front of them, he's not conscious of the fact that it can kill, because in his 40-year career, he's never had a blank gun that was set up to kill a person.
We're out of time.
Got you, man.
You knew it. You could read it in my eye. Jeffery Spellerberg, thank you so much for all your help and all your